Hi everyone. I'm hearing you all saying hi back, so that's quite nice. Um, yeah, as Jessie said, I'm broadcasting live today from Creative Cabin, the first webinar I've done from the Creative Cabin, and we'll talk a little bit more about Creative Cabin later. But for now, what we're going to do is jump straight into After Effects and have a look at this little composition here. You'll see in this composition here that I have a piece of footage from Artbeats, and this is a piece of stock footage. I wanted to make a title sequence with a festive theme, so I looked for something with a festive theme and found this nativity scene. This is just somebody's light display filmed from their front garden. Someone with quite exuberant Christmas decorations has been filmed, and Artbeats have got some great footage like this on their website. So basically what I want to do is I want to take this and I want to make it into a festive horror story title sequence, which is this. Okay, so we're going to take it from that into this. And you'll notice how this has a lot more depth to it. It seems like the tree is really coming into the foreground. And this is all just done with Boris Continuum Complete effects. And specifically, the one that I use most in this is Boris Continuum Complete Grunge, which is a plugin that I just love. It's got so much in it. So what we're going to do is we're going to start here in this first composition, and we're going to open up Boris Grunge. And in here, you'll see we have the effect. I haven't switched it on, so let's switch it on. And basically, it creates a texture. Okay, that's the basic functionality. It does a whole lot more than that, though. So let me show you what it does. First of all, what we're going to do is go into the FX browser. The FX browser is a way of being able to see all of the effects and all of the presets that you can apply using this particular filter or plugin. Now, BCC Grunge comes with lots of presets and lots of textures, and these are all freely provided to you with the plugin when you buy it, okay, when you install it. So you see you've got all these textures and looks that can be applied to your video, either as standalone layers or they can be composited onto the video itself. So I could choose one of these if I wanted to, but I kind of tend to like to make my own custom effects. And the great thing about BCC Grunge is it allows me to do that. So if we cancel out of that for a second, what I'm going to do is just jump to the Finder. And in there, you'll see this folder called Grunge Texture. This is where all those textures that are applied using the Grunge filter are kept. And if I select this one, hit spacebar, you'll see that's the one that is being used there with the default setting, a kind of scratched metal effect. And these are in Macintosh hard drive, library, application support, Boris Effects, Grunge Texture, and that's where these files live. We'll also tell you where they live on Windows a little bit later. I'm on a Mac at the moment. So all I've done here is I've gone online. Now, you can obviously use your own photographs, and I recommend doing that. But if you don't have your own photographs, say it's, you know, the weather's not great here at the moment, it's raining, there's no snow or ice, so I can't go out and take a photograph of ice that doesn't exist. So basically I've gone on to Design Shack and done a quick search, and I found some really nice water and ice textures. Okay, there are really nice textures available here, and basically if I select one of them, it will link up to the original artist that created it so that you can give them credit or you can thank them for the use of their image. Once you've downloaded them, I just took them into Photoshop and just adjusted the levels rather. And then I made sure that they were the correct dimensions for the effect. Okay, it's simply a matter of restarting After Effects after you've done that, and then you'll find that as well as all these lovely default textures that are included free with the plugin, that eventually if I go through all the included ones, which there are quite a lot of, you'll get to my ice ones. So here are the ice ones that I've included here. And these are the ones that I want to use in my finished piece. So what I'm going to do is select this ice one. the first thing we're going to have a look at are the apply modes. There's different ways of applying this. We're going to leave it on normal mode, and these are just like your regular Photoshop blending modes, except there are some ultra powerful ones that are included in there that you won't find in Photoshop rather. But we're going to leave them for now, and we're just going to have a look at color first of all. So I'm going to go to color, open up my color settings. So you'll notice that you have a checkbox to switch on the various different elements, and then you have a kind of section where you get details, where you can further tweak those settings. So if I choose a color, so I'll choose a kind of warmish, brownish, orangish color, something like that. I can choose the color. I can then adjust things like saturation, contrast, brightness, all within the effect. This is great because it means that I can select a core color, and then I can maybe use expressions, for example, to control brightness, contrast, saturation, without having to apply yet another effect. It's all there for me in the plugin. I've also got transformation controls, so I can do things like move the texture, and these, all the textures that are supplied, I think, are loopable, but you can make your own textures loopable as well. You can also rotate the textures, you can scale the textures, flip the textures, adjust the opacity, and so on and so forth. All that's available for you. I'm not going to do that here. All I'm going to do is first of all go down to the bump section. We've got a displacement map in here. I'm not going to use it for this effect, but that's available. But we've also got a bump map, and you'll notice that with the bump map, it really brings that texture to life. Now I can adjust the height of that bump map and the smoothness. We can adjust the lighting, make lighting stronger, pull the light further away from the bump map or closer to it, and adjust the light intensity. There's also controls for the light position and specular, ambient, diffuse properties as well. So a huge amount of control in there. Now, at the moment, the bump map is just working on that texture and working quite nicely. But if I go up to my blending modes again and choose something like, well, let's choose scale screen, you'll notice that now we're seeing the texture of the video footage coming through as well. Now, I'm just going to go into my color and just adjust the contrast, bring that down a bit, and bring up the brightness so that you can see that a little bit more clearly. Okay, there you can see the texture of the video is also being bumped, as well as the texture that's been applied. So essentially, we're combining two layers together with a blending mode and then applying a bump map to it. Okay, so in this project, I've skipped a couple of sections here. So I'm going to go on to this one where I've already prepared one with exactly the settings that I want. And in here, what we're going to do is go back into the effect and apply some other elements. So the next thing I'm going to apply is a flicker. Now, flicker is pretty self-explanatory. If we preview that, you'll notice we've now got a flickering light effect, which adds to the kind of spooky feeling that I want to portray. Now, as you would expect, there's control in there about whether you want to make it brighter, darker, or both. The amount, the speed, and the randomness can all be changed. We're going to leave it on the default setting. The default settings work quite well in this situation. Sometimes you'll need to tweak them, but in this situation, they work quite well. We're then going to apply orbs. What are orbs, I hear you cry? Well, if I increase the outline intensity, you'll see exactly what they are. They're circular shapes that are composited on the footage that give us a kind of random lighting effect or flickering effect. And there's various different ways of controlling these, as you would expect. You can blur them, you can change the color, you can apply gradients, reverse the gradients, randomize the colors, adjust the intensity. There's all sorts of control in there. All I'm going to do is just very quickly change the color. Okay, so we're going to choose a lighter kind of beige color for those orbs, and that's that work done. Okay, so the other thing we're going to put on is dust. So we'll open up our dust settings, and as you would expect, there's all sorts of control in there for dust. And as I increase the density of the dust and the scale of the dust, hopefully you'll be able to see it composited there. Let's just bring that density down a little bit. You can see those dust particles flickering on and off as I adjust those values. Okay, and that just adds another bit of randomness to the whole thing. We've got flickering lights, we've got bits of dust floating around, all sorts of bits and pieces that just make the whole thing look more organic. Okay. So again, I'm going to go back here where I've already created it with exactly the settings that I want. You'll see the orbs are slightly stronger in this one. And now what we're going to do is have a look at the spotlight and vignette settings. Now I'm going to do something a bit odd with vignette. I kind of like to try and break plugins and make them do things they're not supposed to do. So that's what I'm going to do here. Sorry, everyone at Boris, but I'm going to make your plugin do something it wasn't designed to do. So I'm going to put the spotlight on, okay? And that just adds a little bit of light to the scene. What I really wanted to do with this was I thought I want to do a kind of multi-layered vignette, but the vignette settings only allow me to choose one color. So I had a little idea. I thought, what about if I make the spotlight a vignette and then place the vignette on top of that? And that's what I'm going to do here. So notice that if I adjust the position of the spotlight, let's just pull that in a bit further. And the intensity of the spotlight and the cone angle. Okay, let's just bring that down. I think I've done the intensity a little bit too high, so let's pull that down and we'll make the cone angle a little bit wider than that. Okay, bear with me. Okay, so eventually, once I get my settings right, you can see that I end up with what looks like a vignette effect. So basically it's a lighting effect. And it gives me a really nice kind of textured vignette because the light is picking up areas in the dark areas of the footage. So I'm kind of getting an extreme textured vignette using the spotlight. And then what I can do is switch the actual vignette settings on, but use them to create a kind of overlay, a kind of dusky overlay. So what I'm going to do is change the color of the vignette to a grayish, greenish, kind of creepy color, Stephen King type color. Okay, a kind of desaturated grey-green kind of works really well here. And of course, I've got all the settings for the vignette in here. I can adjust the radius. I can add a blur as well as a color, which is really nice. So I can start to blur these areas and increase the blur amount maybe to about 40. So we're doubling up the blur value. And of course, all the softness and stretch and rotate settings are in there that you would expect. So I'm going to bring the opacity down to about 80% for that. And we're just going to have that sitting on the edge at the moment. And again, let's go back here and open up this one. Now this one, I've chosen slightly different colors. And we're also going to add some noise and grain onto this one. So let's go down here, switch on noise. Okay, open up the noise settings. We'll increase the amount of noise. I'm going to choose monochromatic noise, and we'll also stick a bit of grain on there for good measure. And all these layers of grain and noise really grunge up my footage really nicely. Now, you may be thinking, I can't even see the footage now. It's so grunged up, I can hardly see it. And you're right, it really is quite grungy, but I'm going to show you a way that we can reveal the footage again, so don't worry about that. Now, there are glow settings in there. I don't really want to use those at the moment because I'm going to create a separate glow that we're going to apply later. So what we're going to do is jump back here and we're going to have a look at the pixel chooser. Now, the pixel chooser is pretty amazing. I've got slightly less grunge and grain in this one, but you'll see that we're still basically got the same thing. We've got our video footage and our texture combining with bump map and all the bits and pieces that go together and make it look really grainy and grungy and distressed. So what I want to do now is bring back my nativity scene, bring it back into the mix. Now, there's one thing that's included in pretty much all the BCC plugins, I believe, called the Pixel Chooser. Quite often when I show the Pixel Chooser, people say, oh, is that a new feature? I've never seen that before. It's right down at the bottom of the Boris plugins, and I'm afraid, no, it's not a new feature. You've just not been looking carefully enough if you've never found it, because it's been in there for quite a while, and it's extremely powerful. It basically allows you to composite the effect in different ways and to control what elements of your footage the effect is applied to. Now, as a default, the Pixel Chooser will be off. So the first thing you need to do is switch it on. And when you do, you get access to the Pixel Chooser settings. Okay, now just be aware that you can load and save Pixel Chooser settings, which is really useful. You can transfer them from one effect to another, things like that. There's two ways of applying the Pixel Chooser. You can apply it using a mask. So you could select an area and say, I only want this effect to be applied in that area. And that's what you would use the region settings for. I'm going to close that up because what we're going to do is use the matte settings. Now, the matte settings allow you to use the different channels in the image to selectively apply the effect. So I could look through my channels, first of all, look at the green channel, the red channel, the blue channel. If I also want to look at the source footage, I can open up the footage in the layer panel in After Effects and have a look at the channels in there as well. So what I'm looking for is a channel where the detail is still there. I want the detail in the manger. I think it's called a manger. I'm not quite sure. And all the characters. If I go to the blue channel, you'll see we're losing a little bit too much of the detail. So I think the red channel is probably going to be the strongest channel to work with. It's important that you understand how the channels work if you're using the Pixel Chooser. Now, obviously, you don't have to use the RGB channels. You could use the Luma channel. So I could use the lightness from the image to determine which areas are going to have the effect applied to them and which aren't. Now, at the moment, it's using luminance values and it's using levels to control those. So if I want more of the lighter areas to be affected, I can reduce the white level value, and you'll see all the light areas in the image are now being affected by that texture. I'm just going to undo that, and if I want the darker areas to be affected by the texture, I would bring up the black level controls until they're being affected. Now, it's not so easy to do that because we don't have any really black pixels in there. There are other ways of controlling this. We're not going to use Luma, though. We're going to use the red channel. Now, be aware that you can also use things like alpha channels, saturation, hue, lightness, and various other ways of selecting pixels. So we're going to use the red channel. Now, if we go back to the layer panel, and now I'm going to go into my layer panel and just go back using the view menu to see my layer without any effects applied. And I'm going to just have a think again about what's happening here. Now, what I want is I want the white areas or the lighter areas to be unaffected by the effect. I want the mid areas, so all the grey areas, to be affected, and then I want the dark areas to be unaffected. Okay, so what I'm going to do is come out of the layer panel, go back over to here, and instead of using levels, there are two other choices. You've got threshold, where you can choose a threshold value, or range. And range is great because it allows me to select a range of values. So I could say, okay, I want to knock out all the dark values, so maybe to about a value of 10. And then I also want to increase the amount of white that is unaffected. So basically, I'm saying anything above 195, say, with a red value above 195, and below 10 will be unaffected. And the only other areas that are going to be affected are these areas here. So I can also add softness to that. So I can soften that effect down. And you'll see by softening it, I start to get little edges coming back in here to the building. So that's quite nice, softening that. I can also blur the matte as well. Now, you don't want to go too far with that because you don't want to lose too much of the detail. But it's really this pixel chooser that's actually bringing back a lot of the depth to the shot. You'll see now that we're really getting a sense of depth as we scrub through that shot. Now, the pixel chooser is great. The only problem in this situation was that I actually wanted to treat the characters differently from the other elements in the shot. And that'll further help to bring them forward and give them a sense of depth. But there isn't any way at the moment of being able to do that easily. I'm just going to pull that value down a little bit more. We're losing a little bit of that character there. So what I decided to do was, again, use the effect for something it wasn't designed for. So I was trying to think of how I could kind of separate the elements. And I came across the idea that I could just switch off the pixel chooser in this layer and then duplicate the layer. So Command D to duplicate it. Open up the effect on this layer. Now on this layer, I'm going to switch off all those elements that I don't need. And this is why these little checkboxes are great. So it's great being able to go in and adjust details down here, but it's great just having a switch to switch the whole thing on or off. It means that you don't have to remember all the settings or save presets. You can just simply switch them on and off. Okay, so I've switched off all those other elements. All I'm using here is the pixel chooser. And I'm going to say, instead of putting the pixel chooser onto on, I'm going to say view chosen pixels. Basically, what it's doing is creating a matte for me. And it's showing me black pixels, white pixels, and grey pixels. Now I can use these pixels to determine areas of transparency in my other layer. So if you think about it, this layer, instead of just revealing pieces of footage through the effect, what I can do is I can use this layer to actually punch holes in this layer through to another layer that I can color correct the way I want it to. So that's what I'm going to do. Now, if I'm going to use this as a matte, which is the kind of official name for the process I've just described, then I need to pre-compose this layer. Keyboard shortcut for that is Command-Shift-C or Control-Shift-C on Windows. And here's the pre-compose window. What I'm going to do is call this matte comp. Now, the reason we need to pre-compose it is that After Effects will naturally look at a layer for a matte before the effect's applied. So it's not going to take the effect into consideration when it looks at that source layer. If you want it to take the layer and the effect, you need to pre-compose it to compound those two things together. Now, if we choose the default leave all attributes in 06 pixel chooser, it's basically going to leave the effect in this comp, which is not what we want. We want to move all the attributes, including the BCC Grunge effect, with its pixel chooser into the new composition. So we'll say move all attributes into new composition and click OK. Okay, it doesn't appear any different. It's just a nested composition that has that effect rendered into it. But now we can use it to create transparency. There's lots of ways of doing that. You can use effects to do that, but the easiest way is really to go to your modes panel, and in there use the track matte settings to take a luma matte from that layer. So we're going to use the luminance values of the layer above to create transparency in this layer. And that's exactly what it does. So if I switch on my transparency grid, you can see now that we just have our lovely texture isolated to just those areas. And you can see all that lovely noise and visual disturbance happening within that area. Okay, I really like the way that the tree's cut out as well. You just get a suggestion of that tree there. Okay, so where do we go from here? Okay, so the next step is to switch on the layer underneath. And if I switch on that layer and just solo it, you'll see it's basically just another copy of that layer. But the nice thing about this is once it's composited, it looks really lovely. And I can go in here and adjust the gamma, for example. Okay, and I can do that by using the scrubbable values over in the effect control panel, or as with all of these lovely Boris effects, I can use a nice intuitive visual control right in the composition panel. So basically what I'm wanting to do is pull that down till we're getting a little bit more detail in here. So we're getting a little bit more depth within this nativity scene. So let's just go back to fit up to 100%. And you'll see that's fitting in really nicely now. Okay, we've got the two elements compositing really nicely using the pixel chooser. So two ways of using it. You can use it as it's designed, which is to mask off certain areas that would be applied to the effect and not others, or you can use it to create a matte. Another way of doing it would be, we could have applied the effect to that layer and then just used a blending mode to blend the two layers together. There's lots of different ways of doing it. And I usually experiment with 2 or 3 different approaches before I come up with the one that I like. In this situation, I just felt like I wanted to create those transparent areas. The other thing is it leaves it open for me to now apply something like a shadow to that. So if I apply a shadow, let's just put the BCC drop shadow on there. I can now get the shadow to be applied after the transparency. So I can kind of, it just leaves it more flexible for me, really, to be able to have transparency in that layer. I can use the alpha channel for lots of different things. Okay, speaking of blending modes, we can now also blend that as well. So we could try different blending modes. Obviously, darken's not really what I'm looking for, but now that I've selected that, I can hold down Shift and hit plus and minus on the keyboard just to cycle through my different blending modes. And this is another process I go through when I'm creating these kind of layered, textured designs, just trying out different blending modes till you see what works. And in this, I quite like the difference mode in this one, actually. I quite like that spooky one there. Yeah, it kind of reminds me of The Exorcist or something like that, with the lamp and that kind of atmospheric kind of noise around it. Exclusion also works. So in fact, I'm going to keep it on difference. I like difference mode. It works really well here. So there's no right or wrong, just experiment with that. So we've got the background roughly how we want it. We're going to do a little bit more to it, but for now, we're going to move on and have a look at some text. Now, I've got 2 text compositions here. What I want to do is open up one of those and explain why these are compositions. You'll see here I've got a text layer, which has my titles, Silent Night, and that text layer is a text layer. It's a vector-based text layer, which works fine. You can apply the Boris effects to it. That's absolutely fine. But you'll find that when you use the, if I switch that on and double click it, you'll see it works fine. But if I was to go to the FX browser, using vector-based text, you'll find that it doesn't really appear properly in the effects browser. So what I've done is pre-composed it so that I can see all of my available effects. And the one that I've applied here is Edge Grunge. And Edge Grunge is great for kind of eating away at the edge of a layer. You can use it on the alpha channel of a layer just to eat away at the edge of it. And there are lots of really great presets in here that you can apply. Okay, so I've applied it to the text. I've got 2 layers of this text applied. And again, this is because I kind of like creating a layered, composited kind of feel. And I usually find that just one layer doesn't really give me the effect that I want. So what I've got here is I've got Edge Grunge, and then I'm going to put Raise Puffy on there as well. There are lots of different Boris raise effects. If we have a look down here, we've got, let's come down here to our raise. So you'll see we've got raised cartoon, puffy, radiant edges, spotlight, rings, ripply, streaky, textured, wedge. And I tried them all. And the one that I liked the best was, in this situation, was raised puffy. By the way, in Edge Grunge, you've got lots of settings. So if I want to adjust the burn width, if it's a little bit too much, I can just reduce it a little bit, and adjust the fade and the burn progression, things like that. I can have it animate over time. And of course, you can adjust the progression using the built-in controls there as well. So let's close that up and let's have a look at Raise Puffy. I found that the gradient that it defaults to worked absolutely fine for me, but you can change that. I really like the controls in this effect. They're fantastic. If I just zoom in a little bit, maybe not that much, let's zoom out a little bit from there. You'll notice that I've got control over the hue, so I can change the color. I can adjust the intensity, and you can see there the rays emanating from that text. And I can also adjust the length. So lots of control in there to control how those rays are rendered. Of course, you can go in here and just use the standard scrubbable values in there to control the rays effect. Okay, so I've also applied another layer on top, and I really like the way the rays are emitting from there, and I like that grungy edge, but I usually find that applying 2 layers is better than 1. And what I've done here is I've used hard light mode to composite this layer on top of the other layer. If we have a look at that one in isolation, I'm also going to apply an edge effect to that and a multi-shadow. So let's switch that on again. Notice what the multi-shadow does. It just gives me a little bit more depth so that I can read the characters a little bit better. It's giving me a little bit of shadow between the text and the light rays emitting from behind. Now, it's a little bit OTT, so I'd probably bring down the intensity a little bit and maybe the distance. So we've just got a very, very subtle shadow. You can also adjust the softness while I'm in there. And then on top of that, I've got an edge grunge. Okay, and this edge grunge is the altogether preset. And if we go into our FX browser, you should be able to see the altogether preset there. Okay, and that's been applied to the text. So we've now got the text in there. We've got that position where we want it. It's still looking a little bit too flat. I'm not really that happy with this area here. It's a little bit too flat. So what we're going to do is go back to our project panel, open up this one, where we're going to apply an adjustment layer. Now, I've applied the adjustment layer between the 2 text layers, and I'll explain why in a little while. What I'm going to do is hit E on the keyboard, and you'll see I've already applied 2 effects. One is the BCC vignette effect. And if I apply that, you'll see it applies a vignette to the footage, which is really nice. I'm going to do a couple of things with the vignette. I want more dark areas here and down here. So what I'm going to do is center it somewhere up here. That also works because the light's kind of coming from this area as well. So let's just bring the center up into this area here. And that just darkens down that area nicely for the text. I can also adjust the softness and the smoothness just to bring that dark area in a little bit more. Let's just adjust the radius very slightly. And of course, there's lots of different ways to composite that. I could multiply it, screen it, whatever I want to do. And I can change the color, but I'm quite happy with that. I like the way the tree is still highlighted. We've got some dark areas down here in the corner and some nice dark areas up here. And finally, I'm going to put a film glow on. Now, the default for film glow is a wee bit too strong, as we say in Scotland. So what I'm going to do is go into my effects browser, first of all, and use one of the effects as a starting point. There are some great looks in here. By the way, these are all searchable, so you can go through and search for the look that you want. There's some really good kind of scary movie ones in here. Got things like Green Haze, Envy, some really spooky kind of lighting effects. So it's quite amazing the different looks that you can get just from one effect. I quite like this one, Warm Light Mist, so I'm going to double click it and apply it to the footage. And then I've got less work to do in order to get it the way I want it. I am going to adjust it slightly. And again, I'm going to go into my controls here. I'm going to adjust the threshold. You can see that what that's doing, it's just defining the areas which will have the glow applied to them. I'll adjust the radius, the intensity, and now you can see it's only really those main characters that are having that glow applied to them. Let's bring the radius down, threshold slightly back down, and then we'll go back up to fit up to 100. Okay, so we've got the glow effect applied as well. So let's go back to our project panel. Only other thing to do is really have a look at some different blending modes as well. The other mode that I find works really well here is the exclusion mode, because that allows us to keep, you can see there's quite a lot of detail held in that building there and in the tree. Exclusion mode I found worked really well, as well as difference mode. Difference mode is a little bit OTT. Lighten mode also works well. So up to you to choose which mode you prefer. A little tip for you, when you're comparing modes, really useful thing to use is a snapshot tool. So if I click on Take Snapshot and then go to Exclusion, I can now compare, whoops, wrong button. So I go to Exclusion, then go to Lighten and press the playback button. I can compare the two, okay? So actually I think the Lighten mode that I have currently is better for what I'm after. So the only thing left to do is to go to the end result and just preview it. So I'm just going to preview that. And you can see there it really feels like we've got a little bit more depth to the shot. Now there are various other things we could do there. We could animate the noise itself, the texture itself. Remember we had a look at the transform settings. We could have that zooming in at the same timing as the camera's zooming in. We could also track the text into the shot. So there's lots of other options of what we could do with this. But that's how to use basically one effect, the grunge effect, to really take that kind of standard stock footage and really bring it to life and give it a bit of depth. It almost looks like 3D footage when you watch that zooming in. So with that, what I'm going to do is just jump over to my presentation. I've got a couple of freebies to give away and also a few things to tell you about. So what we're going to do is stop that playing back, and then we're going to have some Q&A as well. So I'm going to jump over to my presentation for a second. And as I said earlier, I'm presenting live from Creative Cabin today. And Creative Cabin is my studio where I create all of my freelance work. I also record all my video training here as well. And when I'm not using it, I rent it out to other people to use it. And I get people coming here to write books, to record training, or just to get their head down and do a bit of work. And I also provide training here. So if people want to come here and get 2 days training, they can come and stay in the cabin. And during the day have training with me, and in the evenings they can play on the computer or watch TV or do whatever they want to do. So this is the Creative Cabin, and that's where I'm presenting from. Just a little word about Artbeats. Artbeats kindly contributed that piece of footage, and they have lots of great deals at artbeats.com. So please go and visit there if you get a minute to. I'd really appreciate that. A really great company to work with. A little bit about my websites. angietaylor.co.uk is one of my websites. Let's just go and visit there. If you want to get access to lots of free tutorials, I have a link directly to free tutorials on my website. If you click on that, you can get a link to lots of free tutorials that I've made available online, including some Boris tutorials on there. I've also got links to my books. If you want to learn about some of the books that I've written, you want to find out about them, I've got a blog and examples of work, obviously, on there as well. So let's just jump back to the presentation. I've also got a website at Creative Cabin. So if you want to find out more about the cabin and how to book the cabin, you can go to my Creative Cabin website and find out more about it there. Okay, a few other things. Twitter. I'm on Twitter nearly every day, and I'm happy to take all the questions that you have about Boris Effects or about After Effects, Cinema 4D, Photoshop, Illustrator. Just fire away. My Twitter handle is the Angie Taylor, and I also have another Twitter handle, Creative Cabin UK. So you can get hold of me on Twitter if you need to help with any technical support questions. I'm also on Facebook, so the Angie Taylor is my Facebook page as well. So if you need to get hold of me, that's where to do it. Now, the other thing I want to talk about is my product HUD Circles. And HUD Circles is interface elements for After Effects. And basically I'm selling these. It's a template project which creates lots of circular elements that you can use to create your own heads-up display interfaces for your motion graphic design projects. I'm going to give away one of these when we move on to questions. So if you want to win a copy of this, then stick around and we'll have some questions and answers where you can win a copy of this. Okay, the other thing is a freebie for everyone. So everyone who's listening can get access to my free trial offer at lynda.com. If you go to www.lynda.com/trial/Angie Taylor and sign up using the code 7-day free trial, it will actually give you contradictory 10 days free trial. So it's been updated now to 10 days. So it will take you to this page on lynda.com where you can sign up and you'll get 10 days free to watch all the tutorials you want to watch on lynda.com. So it's a really great learning resource there. So everyone has access to that. So just copy down that code 7-day free trial.